Okay, so this week we're going to be looking at approaches to online guidance. So a lot of the point of this course is to talk about integrated guidance, and so that's really about how different types of guidance, different modes, online, face-to-face, and so on, can work together. But the internet is a really important part of this, as we've been talking about a lot. And so it's important, I think, that we focus a little bit on that. So this week we're going to be doing that, and we're going to be looking at some of the different approaches to online guidance. So if we start with the question of why deliver careers services online, I think we can come up with quite a few good answers to that. So firstly, being able to deliver stuff online helps us to transcend geography. If somebody's not in the same place as us, then it's really helpful for them to be able to connect to us via the internet. It can also provide equality of access by allowing a range of diverse clients to access services. Obviously, that's dependent on them having digital access and digital literacy, but the internet opens up our services, increases access. It also provides sort of immediacy of access to a range of different levels of service that are not always easy to get at if you have to go in and access them face to face. So for example, going in and meeting someone to have a career counselling interview can be difficult if you are working and you can't travel while their office is open. It can also provide some confidential and discreet services that enable you to access it without having to turn up in a local centre or talk to someone in your workplace. So you can choose where and when you want to access this. It can be flexible and it gives the service a greater capacity to manage and respond to peaks in demand. So if, for example, there's a day, perhaps the day when people are getting the results from an exam, when you think actually there's going to be a lot of demand for career support today, you can make sure that you pool some of that support across the country. It can give greater access to specialist services. For example, we might have particular expertise in redundancy or retirement or job change or apprenticeships or being able to speak different languages. And these can all be things which may not be available in every single location. So by doing stuff online, we can make that available. And another thing that's sort of very interesting is that we can use campaign support. We can use online services as campaign support, which allows us to link this kind of provision to national media campaigns. So perhaps campaigns that have been running on the television or the radio about career support, we can link to them with online services. And at least potentially, it can make use of or make cost savings. Now, I think we need to be a little bit skeptical about this because online services are not always cheaper, but certainly depending on how you organise them, there is that potential. So I'm then going to start with a few lessons for designing careers websites that comes from a paper that was published by Careers and Enterprise Company in England, and they say, okay, so make sure that the careers websites that you construct are constructed overtly for effective career learning. Think about this as a learning intervention and recognise that different careers websites and different functionality will be useful to different young people. And we're going to be looking at some of those different types of functionality throughout the presentation today. Don't assume that young people have high levels of digital career literacy, or indeed any of your users have high levels of digital career literacy, or that they're capable of effectively using online resources unaided. And think carefully about whether and how to involve careers professionals in the development and delivery of careers websites. Make use of the capacity of careers website to connect young people to those outside of their immediate network. That's a really powerful tool. Again, we'll be talking about that a bit more today. But it's not just a careers website is not just an opportunity to present information, nor is it just an opportunity to interact with a careers professional. It can be used for a wide range of other things as well. And I think where possible, we would like to see careers websites embedded into wider career learning activities, which is really the kind of central thesis of this course. So that comes from Viegas et al. The references are all provided at the end of this presentation. So I've set out a framework of different types of careers provision. I'm going to work through that today. So we talk about provision of information, the provision of automated interactions, and then various kinds of communication that we can provide. So let's start with information. So when we're talking about the provision of information, we can be talking about the provision of all sorts of different information. We could break that down into information about the self. How do we become more self-aware? Information about opportunities. How do we become aware of the opportunities that are available? Decision-making information. How do we become more aware of how we make decisions? Career building information. Can we be better at finding out how we build our careers? And each of these is a different type of information, so we can put them all together and we can think of all the types of information that we might want to present to people. And as you can see from here, it's a lot of different types of things that we might want to provide people information with. Now, we've already covered in a previous lecture the idea of creating online career information, so I'm not going to go back over that, but it's worth going back and watching that in the context of thinking about this idea of creating career information as being one of the key ways in which you can deliver online career guidance. So let's move on to think about automated interactions. So what do we mean by automated interactions? Well, the most common kind of automated interaction would be a computer-assisted guidance system. And so what this is a wide range of different tools which we might combine together into a coherent platform. So that might include initial assessments, provisions of targeted information. So the information might be specifically targeted to the individual, perhaps based on their initial assessment. And this is, I think, really at the heart of what this automated interaction is that it's not just the provision of information, but it's the provision of information in a targeted way, which takes account of the unique questions of the individual. And so that's, I think, when we start to get something that's more like artificial intelligence or automated interaction, that it notices things that the person does and it tries to channel relevant things to them. We might also include things like psychometric testing and career assessment as part of a computer-assisted guidance system. And we might also have a range of action planning tools or CV building tools and that kind of thing. So in a genuine computer-assisted guidance system, these things would all be linked together. But we also can just offer some of these components individually. So that would be perhaps we just provide a career assessment, or we just provide some action planning tools. And that would be quite a common way in which automated interactions are used. If you want to see an example of a career assessment or an automated interaction, then you could go to the New Zealand website. I mean, in fact, there are many of these things, and you can find many of them. I'm sure there will be Norwegian examples, but this one on the Careers New Zealand website, I think is pretty good. It's worth looking at. It's called Career Quest, so definitely go and have a look at that. We then sort of think about another type, a more sort of, I suppose, more recent development is the development of the use of games and simulations as a form of automated interaction. And that's really interesting, I think, because a game or simulation can provide a simulated environment in which individuals can explore the world of work and experiment in their career. It provides a really strong opportunity for career learning if done well, and can be combined with forms of communication and interaction. So an example of what that might look like, this site from Careers Wales is quite a useful one. It's called the job interview, and it's essentially a little simulated job interview that you can work through, a client could work through and think about before they go to a job interview. So it gives them basically a way of learning that's online, that allows them to explore. So you go and you think about, okay, who could I talk to before I go to my interview? What might I wear to my interview? How might I make an entrance? And that kind of thing. So you're playing through a simulated example. So if we then move on to think about communications, different types of communications, we've divided this into three categories. So one-to-one, one-to-many, or many-to-one, and many-to-many. So let's think about what each of those means. For that, it's worth thinking that there are a lot of decisions that we might make when we're communicating online. So we decide whether it's synchronous, so are we talking to people at the same time, or asynchronous? Is it text-based or multimedia? So are we just typing to people, or are we sharing videos and that kind of thing, audio? Are we going to do it, as we said, one-to-one, one-to-many, many-to-many? Are the spaces that we're going to conduct our communication in, are they going to be open or closed spaces? How long? So what I mean by open or closed is, are they going to be available for everyone in the world to wander into and see? Or is it going to be something where only the person you're talking to can see that? And that has really important implications for things like confidentiality and so on, and data protection as well. So how long is this interaction going to go on for? How often is it going to take place? These are all key decisions that you need to think through. So one-to-one interactions probably are the most common and most things that you're probably most familiar with. So a one-to-one communication can be asynchronous. It could be a series of email exchanges. Somebody emails you, you answer that email, they then ask you further follow-up questions and so on. Or it could be a kind of Skype or video interview sort of context, which in many ways has a lot in common with conventional face-to-face interactions. But there's another thing that's really important, another decision that's really important here, which is who the one-to-one communication with really matters. So it can be with a career professional, in which case we might call it career counselling. It could be with an employer, in which case we might see it as a mentoring interaction, or it could be with a peer, so it might be sort of peer support. So one-to-one is not just online counselling, it's much broader than that. There are more decisions to make about how you're going to use these technologies in providing people with career support and career guidance. So if we then think about the one-to-many or many-to-one, what we've got here is a blog post that someone has done, which looks at making the most of LinkedIn. What you can find is that if you blog a post like that, you're creating a stimulus, which most blogging platforms will then allow people to respond to. They can make comments on and provide sort of feedback to you, and you can then interact with them. So in that case, you're providing career support through a blog, but the career support that you provide is not just the initial blog post, but it's also the subsequent interaction that you might have with people in the comments. If we then think about the course that we're running here, so I've just screenshotted a little interaction from the course that we're running right at the moment. You could also think about using that kind of technology, the kind of a discussion board within an online course, could also serve as a one-to-many, many-to-one kind of e-guidance platform. We can, just as we've done in this course, we could set tasks for students and clients to think about. We could get them to comment on them, to discuss them. We could provide feedback to them, but we could also get them to interact with each other. And so the kind of technology that we've been using to run this course is also suitable for running an online guidance program. We've also talked in a previous session about the face-to-Facebook approach that was taken in Brighton in the UK, and that's another really good example of a one-to-many, many-to-one type of approach. So using Facebook as a way of communicating a series of career information and careers advice to people, and then allowing them to come back and ask questions through the Facebook group. Again, we're working with a group, but we're working with them online in a way where we're controlling what's going out, but many people have the opportunity both to interact with us and with each other. So if we then think about many-to-many, we could be using much the same technology. So I've looked on the Guardian's careers blog, and they present some interesting information. So for example, there's a post which says how to avoid the top 6 most common job interview mistakes. So it's a bit of content that's put out there for people to look at. And what happens there is that is not being done by a career counsellor necessarily, that's being done by a journalist, and they then leave the community to discuss that amongst themselves. And so what we see then is a lot of interaction on that blog, and some of the newspaper blogs are very good at this. They have really a lot of comments going on and people providing feedback, discussing, debating. So the career learning is being done amongst the larger group. If we think of a more sort of perhaps a slightly more controlled way of doing that, might be using LinkedIn, where we can create a post and then we can get people to discuss on our post, and we potentially can continue to participate in that. But the important thing is, once we're on LinkedIn, it's no longer a controlled environment where the counsellor is controlling what happens. It's a many-to-many environment where anyone can be discussing and interacting with anyone else, and you are just one voice within that environment. And this links really strongly to the concept of co-careering that Jana Kettunen and her colleagues talk about in their papers. The idea that in the kind of contemporary online career environment, we are often just one voice, and we're often encouraging people to develop their career, but also we're developing ours, and we're all interacting with each other. So I've provided some references here that hopefully might be useful. These are also presented to you on the reading list online. But in summary, I think there are quite a lot of good reasons why some career guidance should take place online. Ideally, this, I think, should be always viewed as part of a broader integrated guidance offer. And when you provide career guidance online, there are lots of choices to make, and I've just sketched through some of them. But I think the information, automated interaction, and communication typology can be particularly helpful in thinking through what you're trying to do. So thank you for listening. Hopefully that's been useful, and enjoy this module.